We are what we eat. But do we really remain in that consciousness in our daily routines? To feel peaceful, relaxed, and happy, we must therefore first instill these values in our food systems. Shifting awareness to Energize Food Systems, an independent dialogue to contribute to the UN Food Systems Summit, UNFSS. Joining us will be BK Sister Jayanti, Gopal Patel, Pramisha Thapalia, David Fletcher.
In the last year and a half, we have all seen COVID-19 pandemic has led to vulnerability and challenges that faced collectively as humanity across the world. And we saw that food and related systems have further been suffering. And this requires for us to reorient ourselves, our actions, our strategies, our specific coping skills. How do we want to farm? How do we want to continue with our agri-food systems? Everything from production to distribution to our consumption, everything is being questioned. And now, at this point where we stand today, the United Nations have brought in an amazing initiative where we could rethink, re-strategize on what do we want to do now? How do we take it further? Do we really need to change something? And this is the turning point where the world stands today. And the UN recognizes that food is an essential part of our lives. And how do we go about dealing with it? What is our awareness about it? What is our understanding about the problems that we face? And how do we set a course to solve them and radically change the ways that we work around food? And that is something, the food for thought, that will come for this discussion. And we have brought in an amazing set of people who are on the panel today.
I know that food systems involve so many things, from the plantation to the harvesting to the storage, transportation, is a whole slew of things. But my interest in the subject is primarily because I see food as something sacred, something that nature has provided for us. Whatever it is that we do to it is then whatever, but it's a fact that all food ultimately comes from nature. And so it's to remind us of the sacred aspect of our life, I think.
Same as Sister Jayanti said, you know, the sacredness of food is something very special. I care about food because it's something that I put in my body to nourish me and give me energy. I care about the planet and the land and the water and the sun that provides the possibility for food to grow. And I realize more and more all of those interconnected systems, as Sister Jayanti mentioned, that are in place to get the food from the soil to a place where I can put it in my body. And some of those systems are very positive ones, and some of them I think need to be shifted. They can be changed. So I care about food.
You know, one phrase came to mind: we are what we eat. And we say that often: we are what we eat. And then another phrase came to mind, which is real wealth is health. And I think what we see across the world is that our food systems are broken in so many ways. As Sister Jayanti said, you know, there's the plantation, there's the harvesting, there's the transportation. But if you look at all those components in their totality, they're severely unjust, unfair, damaging to the environment, harmful to people, harmful to the planet. And so in order to have healthy people, our food systems need to be healthy and wholesome. And we know that change begins from inside. We need to start with a consciousness shift, a consciousness change, if we want to see an external change in the world. And so that's why I'm here to have this conversation about how to shift the inner understanding of food so that the external food systems can be reformed.
Yeah, in my opinion, basically we live around food, and food is life to me, and it's interconnected with many things, as our previous speaker said, with nature, soil, family, culture, health, and many more. Food system comprises a lot of things that comes from farm to our table, and there are stakeholders, and there are a lot of components inside. And as Gopal also mentioned, our current food systems is broken and it is fragile, weak, and vulnerable. It was weak since many beginning, but COVID-19 pandemic showed us how broken and unsustainable our food system is. So I realized that we need to do something to shift from unsustainable food systems and transition to sustainable food systems. And
there's an interaction of mind and body continually. And of course, body then means that I too am part of nature. This body is made up of the elements of nature, not just nature around me, but this is also nature. And so what I eat is going to impact my mind. We know that. And also, what we don't always realize is that whatever is going on in the mind is going to impact my body. A simple example, why do you remember the food that your mother cooked? You're getting the same food somewhere else maybe, but it doesn't taste quite the same. But it was the consciousness of love that the mother food put into the food. And of course, that's what made it so special. And you remember it the whole of your life, however old you get. So there's a direct link there, mind and body connected together through food. And I think that what's happened in recent times is that a huge amount of greed has come into the whole system. And I'm not talking about greed for food. That's a personal, private matter to deal with. But I'm talking about greed for money, for commercialization, for productivity. I'm talking about the way that people store and hoard and sell at prices when things are difficult. I see that greed has become such a huge part of the whole system of the chain of food that it's become a very corrupt system. Mahatma Gandhi said, there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for any one person's greed. And it's a tragedy of our times that in this age of technology, where we have so much information and so many facilities, yet we have not just malnutrition, but we have starvation for a large proportion of the human family. And that hurts me. And so I think that what can I do about it? How can it change? Well, I think that firstly, can I have specific things that I decide to do in my own life? And that would remove any aspect of violence from my mind, or it would go a long way towards that. So let my source of food be non-violent, which means it should be plant-based. My food and my drink, plant-based. That's something that all of us can do if we understand the value of this. And the other thing that I think we can do to shift all of this is really to have that consciousness that we are in the same boat. If one part of the boat has water coming into it, how long is it going to take for it to reach the rest of the boat? We are not isolated in our countries. If you go up above and look down below, there are no borders. The photographs of planet Earth from NASA showed this very, very clearly. When we first received them, we were absolutely awestruck by the beauty of the planet. But we've divided it up and carved it up in so many different ways. And so to come back to that awareness of one family, and to be able to have the consciousness of caring and sharing, knowing that today it's malnutrition and starvation in one part of the world, but how long is it going to take for everything to topple down and the same thing to happen here? And in fact, it actually is happening. London's supposed to be one of the G7, the richest countries of the planet. And yet what we are finding is that there's starvation and malnutrition here also. So it's not isolated, it's not far away in some little island somewhere, but it's happening all over the world. We don't get the news so much sometimes, but it is a reality. And it's only through a shift in our awareness, our consciousness, and coming back to that awareness of one family that we're going to be able to say, this cannot continue. we have to make a change, and we're the ones who can do it.
I'd love to ask Sister Jayanti, if I can, a question picking up on a few of the points she made. And this is building on, we just did a number of dialogues on faith and food. We did 5 dialogues for each of the action tracks for the summit. And one thing that came out was we talked about like the culture wars that are going on right now in the world, and how food is now becoming part of the cultural wars. And so like here in the US, where I'm based, you know, if you're a West Coast liberal, if you're a coastal liberal elite, then you're for plant-based diets. And if you're someone who lives in the heartland of America, then you're for your hamburgers and, you know, your everything coated in, you know, sugar and so on like that. And we're seeing how food is being politicized in that way. And we see we're living in an age of polarization where people are really, you know, really strong on where their stance is. And so Sister Jayanti, because you spoke about the need for shifting to plant-based diets and more consciousness, and, you know, you've had many decades of experience helping people become more conscious about who they are and the decisions and how they show up in the world. How do we navigate these conversations? Because also, as you said, food is so sacred and personal. We, you know, 3 times a day, we make a very personal decision about what to put in our body. So how to have those conversations with people who may be reluctant or scared to change their habits when it comes to food, because it is such a part of their identity and culture. I'm just wondering if, I know it may be a difficult question, but I think you're probably the best person to answer that on our panel. So I'll ask that to you, please.
You're absolutely right, Gopal. It has become a highly political issue. But I think that if we point out that we're suggesting this, and it's only a suggestion, it can never be a dictate to anybody else because it's my personal choice. And if we point out that it's for health reasons, there's a lot of information available that plant-based diet is good for health. And the other just really isn't. You don't know what sort of chemicals, poisons, hormones you're putting into your body. And the second is, if we think about the planet and the future of the planet, again, I think there's a very strong case to be made for this. If we think about water and the resources that we have that are very, very precious, again, that becomes a very important factor. You know, then of course, there's the aspect of violence and non-violence and what that does. You know, here's an animal that's very scared at that moment, and all those chemicals and hormones I'm putting in here. What's going to be my state of mind? What's going to be happening to my dreams, my nightmares? Where are they coming from? So if one puts across a whole broad range of ideas so that it's not seen as an East-West thing or as a West Coast liberal idea, but really it's something that is the need of the moment for human survival. Really, I would put it as strongly as that. And secondly, if we also say, well, try it for a week, try it for a month and see how you feel at the end of that. So I think not being pedantic about it, not being fundamentalist about it, I think that's a very important part of the whole approach, and just very lightly try it. And also, of course, the other factor is that most people are only just beginning to understand that being plant-based doesn't mean that you have to be chewing lettuce and carrots. There's a huge variety that's available, because I know that people have this impression, but what am I supposed to eat? I don't know what I can eat. But there can be a whole process of learning that goes with that. And I think these are some of the ways in which we can gently put in our pitch.
And could I just add something as an addition to that? I've had the opportunity to teach at a small university here in Canada with lots of international students. So they'd be here for 6 months, eat in the cafeteria. It wasn't the kind of food they were used to. But in this situation, they really liked the chicken that was served. In a course that we had, I showed them a video about the industrial production of chicken in the North American context. For many of them, they were from rural parts of Africa and Asia, and they would have 2 or 3 chickens in their house, and they would take care of them. And at a certain time, it might become part of their food source. But it's very different in many more industrialized urban areas of the world. And the production of something like chicken, when you become aware of it and see it, all of these students stopped eating chicken for the next 6 months it was there. So for me, I think what's really important is the sacredness of our food and our connection to nature and our respect for nature. That's the primary thing. And when we go through that change in our awareness, then we make the choices about what we will eat. And most people move then towards a plant-based diet. But the awareness, I think, as others have said, is a very important first step in that process.